Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms Monsters Radio. Thanks for joining me this evening. I want to welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about a few encounters, horrifying encounters. Each person is afraid of an unexpected encounter with a specific creature or monstrosity at some point in their life. Now, perhaps it's a beast that terrorizes with dangerous resolve. Maybe it's an aberration so hideous that no one can even stand to look at it. You know, horror is defined by perception. So, in this presentation, I'm going to offer several eyewitness reports describing implausible and mind-numbing encounters with unspeakable dread. So please feel free to comment on the accounts and let me know your opinions. So I'm going to start off with this encounter. A Navajo Nation resident is driving home late at night on the highway. He has a companion with him. They see a man sitting on the guardrail up ahead. Then they are shocked when they get closer. Now, he tells me, I live in the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. It was about 2 a.m. and I was driving home with a friend of mine. There was very little traffic on the highway. Up ahead on the side of the road, I see what looks like a man sitting on a guardrail. I got a horrible feeling in my gut. I had the feeling that this guy was going to do something bad, and I honestly felt as though he was going to jump in front of our truck to commit suicide or something. As we got closer, he stands up. I moved into the next lane. As we got closer, he starts walking into the road. I start panicking. There was no time to slow down, and I couldn't swerve to avoid him for fear of rolling the truck. My friend and I started screaming. Just as we were about to hit what I thought was a man, jumps and has wings and jumps over the entire truck. It was only visible for a second, but I can still remember it clearly as day. It had a body of a man from head to waist, but from the waist down it was hairy. The wings were also dark. The feet were the worst. Instead of human feet, they were horrible talons like that of a chicken, but also dark and hairy. The best comparison I can make is that it looked like a human-sized gargoyle. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. If my friend hadn't seen it as well, I'd think I'd gone crazy. On a side note, in the years since that night, I've met only one other person who has seen the same, if not extremely similar creature. Which isn't unusual because that Navajo reservation, especially in the Mexico side, is it's pretty active in a lot of phenomena. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started.
We live in a reality of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
So before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel was made possible via you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are always appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. And the buy me a coffee link is also shown below. So thanks for your consideration. Now, your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, for their commitment to me and the channel. Now, got a few things upcoming on the show. Beside the regular live Friday night presentation and monthly Phantoms and Monsters Insiders live chat, I plan to present a few exclusive interviews in the future, including guests who I have personally investigated and researched with. Now, this upcoming Wednesday, the 11th, there will be Phantoms and Monsters Insiders live chat. So we'll be here to answer questions. If you're not a member, it's only $2.99 a month. So sign up and get in the action. I'll be here and I'll be answering questions directly to the members. And on Tuesday, the 17th at 9:00 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to have an interview with a local proprietor whose name is Beck Lawrence. She owns a shop called the Serpent's Key and Sanctuary. And it's in reference to a lawsuit she has filed against the borough of my town here in Hanover, Pennsylvania, and basically the state of Pennsylvania on its antiquated witchcraft and divination laws. Now, I've written about this, and several people in the chat knew who I'm talking about. So I will have Beck on with me, and we will be talking about that and a few other things as well. So, look, if you're in the chat tonight and you have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one after the presentation. So, this next account, an Iowa man who traveled in Iowa and Illinois for his job was parked at a rest stop. He encountered a bizarre man or thing that horrified him, eventually affecting his life. He states, "Hi, Lon, I've wanted to send this to you for a while, but finally got around to doing so. Now, this incident happened to my friend John. In the 90s, John was an IT guy in parts of eastern Iowa and far west Illinois. He was used to driving from one account to another, either late at night or early in the morning. He'd pick a halfway point to use as a rest stop and to grab one of those awful paper cup coffees from the Sheen while he was there. So early one morning, about 4:30 a.m., he was in Iowa, and he stopped at a wide spot in the road rest stop. He parked, and there weren't any other people around except for a couple of semis who looked like they had been there for quite a while. He went into the men's room, and it was deserted. He used the bathroom and went to the sink to wash his hands. Now, he said he caught some movement from the corner of his eye, and there was a very tall, very thin man standing right in the middle of the entrance about 15 foot away. He said it was dressed in all black, and he said that the guy's eyes were pitch black. The man was giggling to himself, and John swore he was at least 8 foot tall. He glanced down to grab a paper towel from the machine, and when he looked up, this man was so close he could hear him breathing with a loud, bubbly sound. There's no way he could have crossed 15 feet in 1 second. Now, as he told it, this man or thing slowly smiled at him, and it wasn't a smile. It was a baring of serrated, sharp teeth that this thing started chuckling like he was looking at his next meal. My friend screams, "Jesus, help me," and runs for his car. My friend said the man was startled, like he wasn't supposed to be able to move. He felt like he should have been frozen, like staring at a snake. He runs to his car, which wasn't locked, slams the locks down, starts the car, and floors it to get out of there. Now, as he's leaving, he looks in the rear view, and this thing was running after the car. He always swore somehow this thing followed him home. Now, he was paralyzed in an accident not long after, and I went to care for him for a little while. I brought my 3-year-old son with me, and in his typical baby way, he would chatter away while the two of us were talking. So I asked him one day who he was talking to, and my son said, he says his name is Biter, B-I-T-E-R. He has long teeth and he lives with Mr. John. I grabbed my son and ran out of there. I never went back to that house. Now, this next account, a road trip with a friend and her family to rural Louisiana results in a horrifying encounter with an unknown pale-skinned entity in the deep woods. She tells me, I decided to contact you after a recent Bigfoot encounter in Kisatchie National Forest was reported in the news. I had an unexplained experience along with my friend in the same area 3 years ago. This was something I really had a hard time coming to grips with. It happened when I was 16 years old. I lived in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. It was a nice, bustling area, and I was always around people, whether in the apartment complex I was in or just going about my day. I was never truly alone. I had a good friend I still frequently talk to. Let's call her Sarah. Now, her grandmother lives in Louisiana. I had never been one for long trips, but I thought about having a nice girls' weekend with her. That would be fun. And I would bite the bullet and try and enjoy myself for this car ride with her parents, me and her in their old minivan. Now, her grandma wasn't the nicest, but she liked me well enough, I think. We were out in the middle of the woods. She was extremely close to the Kisatchie National Forest, so the homes were spread far apart and the woods were vast. The middle of nowhere. Her grandmother had a thing for people being too close to her. So my friend and I were out in the woods playing and exploring these dense woods behind her property. There was a nice creek and the trees seemed to muffle the outside world. Birds were chirping, and we all saw lots of wildlife, lizards, squirrels, chipmunks. This forest was crawling with life. It was amazing. Now, we must have been out there for at least 2 hours because as the sun started setting, we started to get antsy to return. Now, her grandma had a huge property. She enjoyed her space, and you must understand, there were no houses or neighbors beside her. She basically spent a fortune on her space. So anyway, we started back and followed the winding creek back up to her house since it was vertical to her place. There was a noise behind us. It sounded like a dog or wolf. I stopped and my friend did too, and we listened. The noise continued. There's nothing more terrifying than absolute silence and hearing something behind you following you. We were a way away, but we both were frozen in fear. I was expecting it was a coyote or some wild dog, but as the footsteps from the dark grew closer, I heard a ragged breath that sounded less like a dog and more like a human. It started off quietly, but it grew louder and almost ravenous as it got closer. I slowly turned around as my vision adjusted to the dark. Now it sounded like something was dragging its legs through the leaves. Then it stopped. There were more silence. Nothing. No sounds, no panting, nothing. We were both petrified. We were scared now to move an inch because whatever it was with us and it was close. It would surely outrun and overtake us. Then we both heard the most bizarre sound in our lives. It was a deep, long moan, but it took us both by surprise. I managed to take a quick look at whatever it was. The sound was coming from a tree a couple feet from my friend, and I saw it. One hand was gripping the tree, and through the dusk, I could see paper pale skin and eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. They were wide, and the mouth was gaping like a dead fish. I didn't have time to analyze if it was man or woman, demon, or whatever it was. I just wanted to get out of the woods. The sound stopped as I locked my eyes. I felt my heart stop. My friend managed to tear herself away from a trance, but we were both in and grabbed my arm and we booked it. We both started screaming and yelling to hopefully scare whatever it was after us off. Neither of us heard any noises behind us since we were so pumped with adrenaline, running and screaming. We didn't stop till we slammed the back door and locked it. Now, not 10 minutes after we got back, I demanded to go back home, and my friend was just as shaken as since both of us refused to stay in that house. So we got a hotel at a nice nearby place, and I left the next day. I tried to be in a good mood the rest of the time I was there, and honestly, it was a great trip other than that walk in the woods. Now, her grandmother died 2 weeks after we had left. Being alone on a crazy big property like that she was on, I was surprised a neighbor a couple of miles from her came to check on her. We were not sure how she died, but my friend and I have our suspicions, and we still do. Now, in this next account, a pair of young men encountered a tall, dark humanoid that crawled up to their truck and jumped into the bed. The being was a monstrous creature. Now, he states to me, it was January 2017. I was living at home in northern Minnesota. My parents started being stricter on me as I was a recent high school graduate, and I would come home. The door was usually locked. On nights like this, I would sleep in my truck. Now, on this particular night, it was about 15 below zero Fahrenheit, and I was a little worried about freezing up after shutting off the truck. So I texted my friend Jay to see if he wanted to tag along. Now, Jay and I took off driving through the night until around 12 midnight when we decided to drive up to the base of a local mountain and park the truck for the night. I quickly nodded off, but awoke to Jay nudging my shoulder about 20 minutes later, saying he felt like we weren't alone and felt watched. I was too tired at first, and I told him that it would be all right, but he was persistent. I relented, so I drove towards town, and by the time it was close to about 1 a.m. I found a turn off the highway after driving for about a mile and decided to park on a narrow trail that had been snowed in. I drove about halfway down the trail before I decided the snow was just too deep. We then parked, shut off the truck, and closed our eyes. Now, my eyes had been closed for about 5 minutes, but now I had a feeling that we were being watched. Not sure if Jay had been asleep, I decided to open my eyes to check, but what I saw instead was horrifying. As I looked through the front windshield, I could see a giant humanoid prowling in the bush line about 50 feet from the parked truck. It was coming closer, and my eyes were stuck to it. It got closer, and now I could see it through the passenger window. It felt like it knew I was looking at it as it was creeping up to the truck. I could tell Jay was watching by now, and as he was also frozen with fear. The thing disappeared, creeping towards the rear of the vehicle on the passenger side. We were both still in our seats and hadn't said a word. I even stopped breathing for a bit, I'm sure. Suddenly, the rear suspension began to lower as it climbed into the truck bed ever so slowly. I could see Jay watching it, but I was so terrified I just couldn't look. The humanoid was over 9 foot tall. Now, I was driving a Chevy Silverado, so the thing sat down like it was climbing into a bench seat. Now, as it sat, it began to hunch over and then lower its head into the view through the back window. It was big, yellow bloodshot eyes, and its skin was dark, almost black, with a small mouth and small nose. It peered in. Then Jay freaked out. It quickly jumped from the bed, leaving the truck shaking. For some reason, when it jumped off, my truck lights flashed 3 times, each flash brighter than the other. Jay was screaming, "Go, go, go." I tried to start my truck, but it wouldn't turn over. I turned the key back and forth multiple times with no success, but it eventually started. I never figured out why the ignition failed to turn over. I hauled ass about 100 yards down the trail until I realized I wouldn't be able to turn around in the snow. I stopped and shifted into reverse. When I looked back, I noticed my spotlight was in the back seat, so I told Jay I was going to look for whatever jumped out of my truck. He was quite reluctant, but I didn't care. I had to see it again. I parked the truck and began scanning the bush line towards where we saw it flee. I caught a glimpse of it as I was scanning from left to right. Now, at first, I only saw it lower half and passed it when Jay said, "Did you see that?" I slowly returned the light back to the creature and examined it from top to bottom. It was horrible. The claws hung at the lower leg area, even with the creature erect. The fingers were about a foot long. It was skinny and looked malnourished and decrepit. I looked at the crotch and it had nothing there. It was just smooth. Its chest and abdomen looked elongated but very muscular, but skinny and long. I then brought the light to its face, and that's when my heart dropped. It was looking at my eyes, even with the spotlight on its face. It smiled from that small mouth, only to show a bigger mouth with sharp, crooked teeth. It then backed up while facing us and then disappeared. Now, this next account is another one from Minnesota. A group of younger teen boys was staying in a remote cabin in the Minnesota wilderness when they started to experience a few unexplained events. Later, a pair of eyes peered through the cabin window. Now, he tells me, my story involves myself and three of my really good friends from childhood. I will have them go by Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy. We've all been good friends and even to this day. Now, I could not write this story to you without their help, consent, and experience as well. The story you're about to read is true and was not made up in any way. Regardless of whether we had been seeing things or not, the reality is we had an experience with something very horrifying one night at my friend Kevin's cabin. We thought long and hard about sharing it or not, afraid of being ridiculed, but we were ready to share with the community. And again, you had to be there to experience it. Now, one of my friends had suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed counseling. Regardless, I would like you to know also, I have always been a skeptic of the paranormal. And I find it very hard to believe in many respects, but I love to watch, listen, and read on simply because I always love to have an open mind in life. An open mind, in my opinion, is a growing one. Whether it was paranormal or not, someone was clearly there that night. Now, during the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, I had a couple of my good friends who I had mentioned always made time to go up to one of my friends' family cabin in the north in the forest of Minnesota. It was actually located close to Vermilion Lake. We would always go, for sure, accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad, who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, we felt mature and old enough to go to the cabin on our own, finally without Kevin's dad or the other adult supervision. I would like to mention a little information regarding my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. Now, my friend's cabin was very remote and small based upon the large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one close to us was a solid quarter of a mile away at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. Now, I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island and take his boat across the lake about half a mile to reach the cabin. The lake is huge. My mind always tended to run around when sleeping there at night throughout the years, for it was all one level with only two bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen, living room connected, and a bathroom at the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with a curtain to it, and so we were very easy to see outside to the lake and the woods. This is where my mind would run, as I always thought someone was peering in. Of course, nobody ever was. I had been in that cabin a dozen times throughout my life, and nothing had ever happened, and the older I got, the easier it was to sleep. Now, we would stay a week or 4 or 5 days. On the third night during this trip, when we were there on our own finally, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beer all night. And we went out to his dock to gaze out in the magnitude of the stars and enjoy our buzz. Then suddenly, we heard something out in the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash had come from, having our poles ready 24/7. Thankfully, the moon was out that night, which lit up the lake. Otherwise, it would have been dark as black, and there being no city lights for miles upon miles, we would not have been able to see anything on the lake. Now, my one friend Ryan began to point out, saying, what the hell is that? After looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at, all I can describe it was simply looking like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field length out in the lake from the dock. Now, there's no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very palish skin-like face, but I couldn't make out the eyes, mouth, nose, chin, as it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. Now, I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck, and arm all stood up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake and do their hunting late. They also have black with white colors on their coats and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath up to a minute or so. So it was possible that a loon suddenly popped out of the water after hunting a bit, or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that scenario. All of us had the creeps and noticed it wasn't moving one bit, just treading water in the same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed inside to drink some more. I would like to mention that there was a staircase outside my friend's cabin, about 8 stairs in length down to the bottom where the fire pit was and the dock. Now, at one point, I noticed that the black circle object was still there, but 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring right at us. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun for years. A very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come to take a quick look, keeping my eyes glued to it at the door in the cabin. We came outside to see if it was still looking at us, as if this head was quirked up at us and its chin was up in the air. Nobody dared go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out it probably wasn't a loon, because loons wouldn't have trodden the water in the same spot. Now, eventually, the current would have drifted somewhere else in a rocking manner. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving a single muscle, just staring at us from the deck instead. There was no ripple effect at all on the lake from the object. We said it was just a log, went back in. I could tell everyone was feeling uneasy, though. So a few hours passed, super late into the night at this point, and I knew we needed sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere. Now, as we slept with the windows open that night, my other buddy Tommy and I slept in the living room, while my other 2 friends slept in the 2 separate bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep, I began to hear someone walking around the bottom of the stairs to the cabin, around the campfire and, the bottom of the stairs. I thought I was about to freak out. No question what or whatever or whoever I heard down there was off the dock now and pacing back and forth as it made the sound of a boot clicking on the wood. It was as if it wasn't sure what to do with itself. It lasted for about 3 minutes. Now, wanting to whisper to my buddy, but frozen in fear, I just kept my eyes shut and ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they were taking two steps up the deck stairs suddenly, and then they turned around, and it sounded as if they were sprinting out down towards the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone and a couple minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy asking if he had heard the steps. Both of us were now sitting up. I was startled by my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying we need to leave a minute after these steps vanished. He must have heard us talking, so he felt it, he could come out as well. Either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him why. He woke up my other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go. Get to the boat. It's time to go." He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff. I will never forget it. He said that when he was turning sideways on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking at the top right corner of the window, and it quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and black hair long down the window. Ryan then continued to say, let's go, very seriously. We locked up and we headed down the stairs. We saw barefoot prints in the dirt heading off into the path and all around the cabin. We quickened our pace getting to the boat, not knowing what it was watching us or around us, threw our stuff in the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore or looking in the water. My eyes were just glued to the island trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we had finally gotten our stuff packed in the car and boat tied up, we hopped into the car and took off. Now, we had been driving about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, who said he saw the person outside his window, suddenly broke down in the car sobbing, saying, "What was it, guys? What did I see?" We called to our parents we called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back and that Ryan was freaking out. They told us to get home safely and quickly. Now, it was late, around 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept. And it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up that following weekend and said he experienced nothing while he was there, but did mention the bare footprints were still about, which he thought odd because someone was walking around his property, which bugged him badly. Whatever my one friend saw in that window really hit him hard. Now, after his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up having to seek some help for a couple weeks and hope for some sleeping medicine. Now, as time went on, he ended up being fine, but isn't too comfortable about sleeping next to a window without a curtain. And to this day, I cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, and cannot explain what I saw in the lake and what Ryan specifically saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we're told by a friend's dad who owns it, which I believe him. I personally have never decided to go back to the cabin, which really makes me sad because I had a great childhood memories there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to go back, and I'm with him. So in this next account, a sister and brother are at a local playground in Ontario, Canada, when they noticed two men dressed in black suits with pale skin walking around them. Now, this occurred in 2004 to my brother and me, and I still can't come up with a satisfactory logical answer to explain our experience. We live in Ontario, Canada, and we were 12, me, and he was 10. It was a suburban area built around a medium-sized forest, and our house was backed onto the woods. And we were driving home with our mom, and we were arguing, so she told us to get out and work it out before we came home. So she dropped us off in front of the woods at the playground. Now, there's a connected public path leading back up through the woods to our street, about a 5-minute walk, and a small hill between the playground and the main road. We weren't pleased that we got in trouble, so we made up quickly and started playing on the slide and the swings. Now, my brother was up on the slide platform, and I was over on the swings when he called out to me, "Who are those guys?" I looked over and I saw two men dressed in black suits, white shirts, and black sunglasses coming over the top of the hill toward us. They were walking briskly and purposefully right in our direction. They had brown hair, not close cropped to short, and had pale skin. It was beyond bizarre, and they just scared me right away. I told my brother to come down the slide so we could go home. It had already unnerved him enough that he listened to me. We started down the path home, and when I looked over my shoulder, they were still coming towards us, walking quickly. That was horrifying. So I started to walk even faster, too, holding my brother's hand and pulling him along. Maybe 30 seconds later, I looked behind me again, and they had started to run towards us. They weren't sprinting, more jogging, but they were gaining on us fast. That pushed us over the edge into complete terror. I screamed at my brother to run home as fast as he could. I knew he was a faster runner than me, and I thought that he'd be able to tell our parents if I ended up being kidnapped. I have honestly never run faster in my life, and we didn't look back again until we made it to our house. Now, our parents were still unloading the groceries and were surprised when we ran up out of breath and on the verge of tears. They figured that we had gotten spooked on our own. After all, some guys in suits chasing us was a weird story. The men had never said a word. It was like a wall of silence had accompanied them. And neither of us have ever experienced anything like that again. And it wasn't until last year when I watched a YouTube episode about Men in Black encounters that I realized it was a thing. Has anyone else ever had an encounter like this? Do you have any theories about who the men could have been? Well, MIB chasing kids, that's nothing I really hear about. They were either MIB or two perverts dressed like them, but it's a pretty weird account. I don't know what they ran into. So this next account, a Texas woman describes her encounter with what she believes was a lechuza while staying at her cousin's house. Now, her cousin still experiences unexplained activity. Now, she states this incident occurred in Ozona, Texas in the summer of 2015. I had been on the phone with my ex-boyfriend, but had fallen asleep. Then I suddenly woke up because I could hear my ex-boyfriend saying, "Baby, please, don't do this." I believe that I had broken up with him while I was sleep talking to him. Anyway, he was telling me I was saying ugly things to him. In the middle of our conversation, I hear wings flapping and see a large shadow stop at my window. The first thing that runs through my mind is lechuza. I tell my ex not to hang up, but not to say anything. I'm scared, and I didn't explain anything to him. Then suddenly the shadow disappears. I then start telling my ex what happened, when from the ceiling of my room I hear this horrible laugh and scratching. Then I try to yell, and nothing comes out. I'm frozen scared. I try to yell, and I try to get up, but I can't. Somehow, I finally jump off the bed and ran across to where my cousin and her daughters were asleep. I try to wake up my cousin, so I touch her, and she opens her eyes. I said, "There's a lechuza." She just didn't understand me. She said, "What?" Very loud. The girls woke up, and right then, it's right above my cousin's room. The girl started to cry. I'm starting to freak the heck out. We don't know what to do. Now, my cousin and I decided to call the cops and tell them that we saw someone looking in the window. I mean, what would you think if, we said we need an officer to rid us of this lechuza? Anyway, we call them, and I swear the scratching, laughing, and thuds are louder and getting louder. We wait, and little seconds before I see the spotlight from the cops outside, it stops. The cops arrive, but they soon leave. So about 10 minutes after he leaves, it comes back. We ran to the car and decided to leave. That was the last day I lived with my cousin. Now, this witness later told me that her cousin continues to see shadows at night and that the laughing and scratching still occur. She has tried to record the sound, but each time nothing is heard on the recording. She had tried to use an old cassette recorder, but that didn't work either. So her cousin also stayed at a friend's house, and the disturbance manifested there as well. And this has been continuing now for 7 years. Now, for those who don't know what lechuza is a Spanish word for a type of owl, especially a barn owl. The purported myth is popular throughout northern Mexico and Texas. As the story goes, an old woman shapeshifts into a giant owl, lechuza, to take revenge on people who wronged her during life. Sometimes the owl is variously depicted as black or white, and sometimes with the head of an old woman. It's also, the story is often used as a cautionary tale. But it's the interesting thing. With all these sightings we've had in Chicago with the winged humanoids, and a lot of the witnesses were of Hispanic descent, and many of them were from northern Mexico and the Texas area. Some of them described what they saw as a lechuza. Now, I don't know if it's just a traditional thing, it's the culture, or what it is, but that's what they described to us. So in this next account, the witness states, I'm from Victoria, British Columbia. My story is from there. A couple of years ago, I was going to art school, and I had a part-time job at a grocery store. Now, part of our art lessons was to go into various parts of Victoria and draw buildings and such, things like that. So one field trip we went to a grave site, and we started drawing tombstones and stuff. I remember I sat down and I started drawing this tombstone, and there was a lady's name on there. Anyway, I started drawing it. A couple weeks later, I'm working at the grocery store, and I'm pretty much the only one there. It's a small grocery store, and I'm sitting there with another cashier, and in walks this lady, and I can't see her because I have my back to the door. But the other cashier that I'm working with, we were talking, blah, 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 and she looks at me like she was so freaked out. So I turn around, and I look, and I see this weird-looking lady with long black dress on. I'm totally not lying. She was wearing this long black dress, long scraggly hair, gross looking skin, like grayish tone. And, so I've never seen one with skin tone like that. Anyway, she freaked me out so much. Like that was not what regular people look like. So I screamed and ran away. That was my first instinct, just to scream and run away. I couldn't believe it. So once I realized I had screamed and run away from this lady, I just realized I'm supposed to help instead of running and screaming. I went back and posed myself, and I said, "Can I help you?" She said, "I don't know where I am," like in this real creepy voice. So I was freaked out by this lady. I looked at her. I was close, and her eyes just looked like they were being held up with toothpicks, like it was just bugging out of her face. So I said, "You don't know where you are, let me call you a cab." So I said, "What's your name?" She said, "It's Elizabeth." And just a couple of weeks earlier, when I was drawing this tombstone, I remember that the name of the lady was in this fresh pile of dirt over there on top of the grave. It looked like a fresh grave, and the name was Elizabeth. So I was freaked out by this lady. I mean, she did not look like she was, walking. It looked like she was just floating. She had no footsteps at all. It shook me up so much. That's been 5 years ago, and I'm still creeped out when I think about her. I don't know if I had seen that parallel between the living and the dead, but that person I saw that hovered at me was not human. If they weren't alive. So that's the last account, folks. So if you got any questions, I'm here to take them. Bear Zip, thank you for the $9.99 super sticker. Much appreciated. So let's see what got any questions here. I don't see many questions. I don't see any questions, actually. Sir Wolf. Hi, Lon. What do the indigenous people say about the origins of these rake-like creatures? You mean the pale humanoids, pale crawler humanoids? That whole rake moniker, that's a creepypasta thing. I mean, that was started on the internet. I don't know how that name ever got going, but it's, we really don't have a name for them. I just call them pale crawler humanoids. But anyway, I have never talked to anybody in any of the tribes, any elders or any shamans or anything about these things. Though, I mean, other than the fact that they're seen all over the place. I mean, it's not just one specific area. I mean, I have even heard of sightings on the reservations occasionally. but I have never talked to anybody about it. Now, of course, if it was up in the Adirondacks and up into New York, up into Canada, into Ontario, then they would probably say, well, you saw a Wendigo or something like that. But other than that, I really don't know. I don't know what they even call it or what they referred to or referred as. Dagnammit, do you think that these cryptids that turn invisible like the Liquid Man, Glimmer Man, could be insectoid or past birth Bigfoot? You know, a lot of people think they're actually Bigfoot that are cloaking somehow. I don't know. You know, I have never seen one. I've seen some photographs that could very well be a thinner Bigfoot-like creature. I did see a photograph in Ohio of something that was kind of half manifested that looked like it was a Bigfoot and Glimmer Man as well. So what they are, we really don't know. I don't know what it is. At this point, I think the only thing we can say is it could be anything. Jose Sanchez, is it safe to say that these lechusas are human-like size according to the witch relationship? They come in different sizes. They're usually pretty good size. I know the ones in Chicago ran anywhere from 5 to 10, anywhere from 5 to 6 foot in height. The description is very much like a barn owl, a white barn owl. There was one that was darker, but anywhere from 5 to 6 foot. They had humanoid bodies. Robo 1776, Lon, has anyone developed a way to actually call one of these cryptids in, sort of like a Ouija board experiment? I don't know, but I know I wouldn't do it. I stay away from Ouija boards. As far as any type of other divination, I don't know. I have never read or heard of anybody talking about calling them in or trying to conjure or manifest it. I don't know. Jose Sanchez, do Wendigos, crawlers, and rakes may all be the same or similar thing? They could be. They could be, but normally the Wendigo legend is that of a human that is diseased somehow and has cannibalistic tendencies. These crawlers are different. I mean, their body style is much different as opposed to what a actual Wendigo would be. So, Robo 1776, thank you for the $10. I appreciate it. I heard there might be some new Bigfoot DNA information coming out. What do you think? I don't know. I haven't heard a thing. There's always rumors about something being found, but quite frankly, I haven't seen any evidence or any reports on any of that. If I do, I'll definitely be writing about it or reporting it. Dagnammit. What are your thoughts on when people see the Mothman, they start to become ill? You know, it's not normally being ill. It's just being terrified and frozen in place, or many times they especially in Chicago, people just kind of lose all control of themselves. Many times they fall to the ground, pass out. That's happened many times with some of the witnesses that I've talked to. Pelican X Vibe, what do you think about the Lechusa? Do you believe? How many accounts have you heard? I heard a lot of them. I heard from indigenous people as well as, people who are Hispanic who are from the area. I've heard from people who have moved away from there. I don't know. I think for the most part, it is something that people see some type of being and it's automatically Lechusa. It's the first thing that pops in their mind because it's part of their lore, part of their folklore. I don't know what they are. I really wish I had an answer for you, but I really don't know what they are. Are they some type of being that's manifested somehow? Are they something closely related to what we're dealing with the Mothman or what's happening in Chicago? Very well could be. Is it an interdimensional being? Possibly. Mortal Clown, thank you for the donation. Much appreciated. Anything else, folks? Well, look, Wednesday night, we have the Insider Show. Come a member. Join us. We talk about a lot of different things. I mean, we talk about everything. As long as people are there and asking questions, I'm going to be answering. So, yeah. It's only $2.99 a month. I'm doing a monthly chat. And look, if you have any suggestions as far as some type of perks that you want from me or from the show or anybody else, as far as any type of presentations for insiders, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. So again, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you donated, it's truly appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. And if you do have a sighting or want to contact me, just call me and just write me at Lon Strickler, phantomsmonsters.com. So until we meet again, and I don't know what next Friday show is going to be. I'll figure it out. But anyway, you have a good evening, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.